right. I'm going to do the official opener. Welcome to the Wayland Library. Thank you for coming out this evening. We are excited to have Wayland resident Professor Rachel Spooner here to share her new book, Tales from a Professor's Office. She has nearly 2 decades of experience teaching business law and ethics across undergrad, MBA, and law school programs. At the heart of her career is a dedication to mentoring students, guiding thousands through their academic and personal journeys, particularly during their pivotal first year of college. Beyond academia, Rachel is the founder of Thrive College Coaching, assisting students and families in navigating the transition to college. 2 quick housekeeping notes. First of all, if you're joining us on Zoom and you have a question, just put it in the chat. I'll raise my hand and ask Rachel for you. And also, we are recording this program, so it will be on, hopefully on Waycam, and also the library's YouTube page, and you'll be able to rewatch and share. Thank you, Rachel.
So thank you so much to the library for having me. It's nice to be here. It's been a while since I've been on this floor with like the children's library. A lot of memories. So I always get asked why I wrote this book, and it's a really valid question. I have a full-time job, 2 children, a husband, 2 dogs. Someone might wonder, what would compel you to write a book? So I want to start there, actually, and I think it tells actually a lot about like what this book is all about. So the seed was first planted about a decade ago now, believe it or not, when I read the results of a Gallup poll of all things. Okay, so Gallup Purdue does like all these big national polls. So they had published a poll. I have no idea how it came across my desk, but it was one of the biggest surveys of college graduates in the United States that had ever been done at the time. And it really was trying to get at what leads to success after college. So they were asking questions about like what type of college did you attend, what size of college, what was your major, all of those types of things. And then they dug in and asked some more questions while you were in college. And what the data ultimately showed was there are 3 things that you can do while you're in college to significantly increase your chances of being successful after college. Quick side note, they define successful as a meaningful career, good relationships, and good health, which I think most of us agree are some pretty key factors in being successful after college. So what those 3 things are in a few minutes, don't you worry. But I will tell you what they weren't. They weren't the ranking of your college. They were not the acceptance rate of your college. They weren't the size of your college. So whether you went to a big university, like flagship campus of a state university, a small liberal arts college, a community college, a regional campus of your state university, none of that changed outcomes in terms of success level. These other things did. So I found that super intriguing, okay? Why? Because at that time, about a decade ago, our children were moving from elementary school to middle school and then into high school. And so at the same time I was learning about what really is important in college, I was in a community like Wayland being bombarded with information about admissions and about getting into a good school and selectivity rates and all of those other things. And I felt like someone needs to tell everyone that those things, they're great. There's nothing wrong with selective universities and working hard to get into the school of your dreams, so to speak, although I kind of reject that idea of school of your dreams. But what you do when you get there is so much more important. And I find, and I just did a college drop-off, right? So our started her freshman year. And we heard from several of the administrators as well, and they said, we sort of like worked so hard on admissions, and then we worked so hard on shopping for the dorm, and then we came in, and so this book is intended to answer, okay? So that was a long time ago, a decade ago. I didn't write it until about 2 years ago. I didn't start. A lot of things happened in the interim. I got busy, I changed jobs, COVID hit, and that was a tough time to be a professor. But what I did do is I really started paying attention to my own students. And I really found that the things that this study and all the further reading I did, because I started really digging into the research after I read that survey, all the research was I saw every day in my classrooms, in my office hours. I taught at 2 very selective universities. To get there, you have to be smart and hardworking. Some come and throw advantage of everything the universities offer. They make good friends. They build important relationships. They get good jobs. They have wonderful experiences. Flounder, and they don't have any of that. By others sort of get by for 2 years and then figure it out for the second half, right? And so I started paying attention to what those students who were doing well were doing and having a hard time weren't doing. Okay, and so ultimately I decided to put it all in a book. And because I spend my days with 18 and 19-year-olds, I am right now a professor at Boston College. I mostly teach freshmen. I'm an advisor for freshmen, so I spend a lot of time with college freshmen, and I can tell you all about that if you have questions. But I know that no one wanted to read a book of research. Okay, no one was interested in that. Not even parents, really. I mean, I'm an academic. I barely want to read academic research. And so I knew that parents of students themselves wouldn't be interested. So what I did, students, some of my own students, some other students at other universities, and what I did was use their stories to illustrate what's important. Okay, and so I'm going to read you a few of their quotes, but hopefully if up a copy of the book, you'll be reading like what the students themselves shared with me. And I learned a lot from them, so I hope you will too. So I don't want to bury the lead. That your student needs to do in order to be successful after college or to increase their chances of being successful. We're going to talk about a couple of them, not all of them. Okay, so number one thing is to build a relationship with at least one faculty member before they graduate. It literally doubles your chances of success in life. One person. One person. And if you think about how much time students spend trying to study and get A's and get internships and all these other things, and they never go to office hours. And they're missing the easiest thing, right? The easiest opportunity and the most meaningful. Right, so that about like give you advice on like how to support your students, and if there are any students on Zoom, like what does it mean to build a relationship with the professor? So I'll share some stories. The other two, engagement in something outside of the classroom. So that generally means like extracurricular activities, a club, or something like that. It could be or an internship. The idea really is that if you can reflect what you're learning in the classroom outside of the classroom, that really increases your chances for success. Okay, it also builds your network and helps you learn all sorts of those life skills that matter very much. The last thing is actually a long-term project. So that can take a lot of forms. I usually tell my freshmen, don't worry about that. I'm going to tell you you should do it, but don't worry about it till later in college. But the way it's defined is anything a semester or longer. So at some places, you can do like a thesis your senior year, for example, where you do like a long-term research project, but it doesn't have to be that. I work at business schools. We have courses where it's like a business plan course where like the whole semester you work on like starting an imaginary business. That also provides you with that sort of lengthy, in-depth learning that comes from more than just a series of assignments in class. The book talks a lot more about all of those things and why they matter and how do them, and it sort of breaks down like the pieces of that. But I want to focus a little about professor relationships. So obviously that's near and dear to my heart because I'm very biased. I'm a professor. So let me just briefly tell you why I think it makes such a difference. And probably you can guess all of these things. The first thing most people guess is it helps you do better in class and get better grades. And I think that's definitely true. If you know a professor, you can access help more comfortably. They know you. They know how to help you better, okay? So certainly it's going to improve academic performance, but I actually think that its impact is much greater than that. We are like the first step in their building of a network and understanding how to work with adults. And I mean, they are adults technically when they come to college, but their first sort of adult relationships outside of their families for a lot of them. And so when I hear about an internship or a job, or I meet someone new who does something interesting, I have like 10 students in the back of my mind that I know should talk to that person. And if I don't know those students, even if they got an A in my class, they're not in my mind, okay? And the reason it works so well is because typically professors in your major, they have a network in the topic you're interested in. So I was a lawyer before I became a professor, so I have a little bit more professional network than some academics who sort of are academic their whole lives may have, but they have a different form of academics. So if you're a biology professor, they know who runs all the labs, right? And so the access they have for what students are interested in is really quite great. And if you don't know them, you can't do that, okay? So I think that makes a big difference. Always going to need referrals. I write like 1 million letters of recommendation a year. Everything from study abroad to jobs to grad school, everything in between. It's really hard, even with ChatGPT, to write a good letter if I only know what someone did in my classroom. I can say they did a great job in my classroom, but that's all I can say. Whereas the students that I really know, I can say so much more and share stories and anecdotes. So for all those reasons, your students should prioritize getting to know a professor. Now, this is like so scary for 18-year-olds. Like we all tell them, like if you have a student already, you've probably told them go to office hours. And they're all like, hell no. Like that's going to be so awkward. Like I don't want to do that. So I asked my students for some tips on how and why it mattered. So I'll read you just a few of their quotes. Okay. Piece of advice that came out of my research was very practical, which is go at the beginning of the semester. And I usually tell my students, set yourself a goal the first 2 weeks, you go see everybody once, okay? And so let me read you this quote, which illustrates why that matters. So the risk to reward, 0 reason not to go. It is so easy. The first week of school, you have no work. Spend an hour total your first week and go to each of your 5 professors for 10 minutes. So in the beginning of the semester, there's no expectation that you know anything. It's one of the #1 fears that students have, and why you tell your student to go to office hours and they're like, yeah, sure, because they think like they'd have to have a question or they're going to be quizzed or something scary like that. But if they go the first 2 weeks, they literally can walk in and say, hi, my name is Rachel. I'm from Massachusetts. I just wanted to introduce myself. And that's it. And usually we pick it up from there and we can have a nice conversation. But if you don't, you just say, okay, I have class now. Just wanted to meet you. I'll see you later. And leave. Right? So it really can be a 5 or 10 minute transaction. Hopefully it's longer, okay? But it's really crucial. The other thing is a lot of research shows that once you go to office hours and you know your professor, you're more willing to participate in class. Then you're going to learn more, you're going to get better grades, you're going to get more out of class. And so doing it early is super helpful. It's okay if you don't do it early. You can wait, right? But it's never too late, right? I had a student come to me the last week of the semester a couple years ago and tell me that he did improv, like Saturday Night Live-ish, like comedy. And I was like, why didn't you tell me this 3 months ago? Like, turns out he was hilarious. Hilarious. And I'm glad that he eventually came, and, now we chat all the time, but, like, I was very disappointed. Okay. Why it's nice to go early and feel more comfortable. During freshman year, I went to office hours 3 times so they knew who I was. Once I got more comfortable, I spoke more in class so they knew me. I'm a first-generation student. My parents never graduated from high school. I thought being in the same room as the professor would be cool. I communicate better with an older crowd because I'm older. I thought it would be a cool experience to talk one-on-one. They treat you like a regular person, not as a student. And so, particularly for students, like first-generation students who don't have a lot of experience in like the academic world and don't have their parents like telling them stories and things like that, it's really very helpful to break down that barrier early on in the semester so that they feel more comfortable and can get more out of it. So some other tips that you can pass along, bring a friend. People have this like idea that you just have to go by yourself, but usually my office hours are like about 12 people at a time, which is not typical, but it's good to go with someone. Then again, if it's uncomfortable, you don't have to worry about it. You can keep going. I had some really interesting quotes from students kind of about how do you like build that connection, right? So you stop by office hours once, but then like, how do you know that this is a person that is going to be that one person for you? And I always tell students that, you take 4 or 5 classes a semester times 8 semesters, hopefully we're only doing 8 semesters. And so that's what, like 40, if you have 5 classes a semester, that's 40 professors. You need one. You only need one. So you can kiss a lot of frogs, so to speak. Don't literally kiss any of them, but you can kiss a lot of frogs, have a lot of awkward sort of like, okay, I'm just going to come to you when I really need help before a test. Conversations, and that's okay. You will find some people that you build a connection with and like, have something in common. So very small. So this student attributed some differences with his experiences with different professors to finding common ground with one of his professors. So a lot of college professors are hard to connect with, very academic and different types of intelligence. Some are hard to talk to about your day. My marketing professor's family was from Louisiana, so we could talk about that. Usually I am prepped with questions. I am in for 5 minutes, get questions answered, and leave. So this student was from Louisiana, and so he happened to make that connection. It was like a family connection, and that made him much more comfortable, and so he was really able to like get to know that professor in a different way than some of his others. Another quote about that: better culture and a friendlier environment. Other professors are more professional, and if you go to office hours, they just ask if you have a question. It is not bad. It is a different culture. Certain professors have that reputation of being super friendly. You will find 5 people in their office telling the professor random things. Your friends tell you who is friendly. So certain mouth is a way to encourage your student to ask, like, who's good to get to know, who cares about their students. Hopefully it will be everyone that your student has as a teacher. Okay? But end every chapter with like tips for families. And so this chapter, a couple key tips that I think you can do to encourage your student to make this effort, because it can be super daunting. Even though they know they should do it, it's certainly daunting. So really freshmen, sometimes like they're on a different floor or whatever. So when you're visiting colleges, if you're still, in high school and you're starting to tour, or if you are, moving in or parent something, take a look at the building that they are intended major, or a couple of their intended, the ideas that they might major in, and professors' offices. They don't have your professor. You maybe won't know that yet, but you walk through so they kind of know where it is. Knowing where something is on campus is a huge deal for 18-year-olds, like very, very helpful. So that's something you can just sort of do. I would also say that if your student is still in high school and you're an idea, because you can get a real sense of the vibe of the professors, and do they have people in their offices? Like, are they talking to each other? Is every single door shut? There are good reasons that the doors are shut sometimes, but it's be actually like very informative. Like, people always ask, like, well, how do we know if they like teaching at a college when we tour? Like, they all say they like teaching. Like, that's a really good way, is to walk through. Are there students up talking to professors? If you went to college and you still some people. The last thing is when your child calls with a question, or text more likely, question, suggest, like, don't try and find the answer for them. Just like, that sounds like something your professor might know. And encourage them, like, that would be a good thing to talk about in office hours or whatever. Again, okay, so that's professor relationships. Are there any questions about? I wanted to talk about, there's two more really, but so time, number one thing that trips up first year students, by far. We all know time management is important, understand why, and then I'm going to talk about some like perspective about how to develop those skills, which, some people are really natural, other people, I mean, even us adults, like, some people are really good at that, some people it's more challenging. So if you have a high school student or a new college student, when they were in high school, let's just say in Wayland, right? So Wayland, it's at like 8:30 or whatever, I don't know, our kids ran out the door 1 minute before it started. So say it goes till about like 3:10 or something like that. Then they either do sports or theater, or maybe they have a job after school. Generally speaking, students are out of the house from, let's say, 11 o'clock in the morning to 6 o'clock at night. Sometimes even later if you've got like a game at Westford Academy. Why we play them, I don't know. It's too far away. It can be even later. Okay, so if you add that up, like, they are scheduled, someone else is telling them where to be. 5 days a week from 8 in the morning to like 6 at night. So about 10 hours a day. So 50 hours a week at least. And never mind like Saturday practices and all those other things. Someone else is telling them where to be. So yes, they have to get there and all those things, and that's a good skill they develop. But then they go to university hours. Free time, and is not free time. We have a sea of hours, and time, use just study every second of the day. You're going to go to office hours and make friends, join clubs, and all of those. Learned how to do that because someone extended leave from work or something. I have summers, beach in summers. What to do? I don't really know how to do it. I get up in the morning, I'm like, what should I be doing? I should be doing something. I have that feeling every day. Every day, right? And that's very normal, right? And so they deal with it in really bad ways. Like either they overwork or they underwork or they just sleep or they stay up all night. And so let's talk about like what are some like ways to manage that, okay? So the first is super practical, which is get a calendar. Write down, like schedule yourself excessively for the first month of school. After that, you can back off because you're going to be in a rhythm. Because here's the other thing. The beginning of the semester, clubs haven't started up yet. Like unless you have a part-time job that you line up before you get there, like even if you're going to work, your job hasn't started yet. Like nothing starts the first few weeks of the semester other than classes. And so even a student that will be very busy, unless they're maybe like a varsity athlete, they don't have anything to fill that time. So the key is that first month. So I say get a calendar. You can do a Google Calendar, electronic. There are a million apps. Like you could do a paper calendar, whatever you want. And block your time. You should be able to write in your calendar what you're doing, ideally all day, every day. And it could be like fun time. You know, you could write in your calendar. So I would say before the semester even starts, block out your class schedule. Once you join a club, put the recurring Google Calendar club meeting. If you are doing sports, all those things, put it all in your calendar because then you're going to really see what your day is, okay? When you get your syllabus, put every deadline in your syllabus before classes even start. Okay, now why? Why does that matter? One of the big transitions, again, we don't think about this, from high school to college is high school's like week to week. We tell our students like next week you're going to do that, maybe if they're lucky. They don't really have a syllabus in high school. In college, I publish a syllabus. I expect them to know that in November they have a paper due. Like I talk about it a little in class, but not every professor is going to. And so it's up to you to keep track of that. The other thing is there's going to be a week where you have 2 exams and 2 papers, and if you don't see that in advance, because you've already put it in your calendar and you're like, okay, that's the week, like that weekend I'm going to have to skip the football game, you're in a world of hurt. And so just putting your deadlines in is like super, super helpful. So calendar. Okay, so second thing, and this is really good advice for families, be realistic. Like you, like don't encourage your kids and don't expect your children to change who they are overnight. And to succeed, you feel like a failure, right? So what is that, okay? I thought a 9 a.m. class would be easy in college because I had to be up at 7 in high school. This is a very common mistake, okay? I quickly learned that was not the case. In high school, you go home and go to bed. In college, there are no boundaries. You can hang out with roommates or do stuff. I did not sleep much. Ever since then, I've moved classes later. Now that quote, you don't know this person, is from a student who was an extraordinary student, got amazing grades, did really well, was really hardworking. He did things like took physics classes for fun. He was a finance major. So he was motivated. My point is, this was not a lazy student, but he realized he needed to be realistic about his time. And if he scheduled 10:30 classes, he was going to get up, he was going to like feel fresh, he was going to be effective in his class. And so some students can do 9 a.m.s, and sometimes you don't have a choice, so you have to deal with that. But really do try and similar, your student should not expect that they're going to just do like 1,000,000 hours of homework, okay? So here's another quote. Be reasonable with yourself. I used to say, I'm going to work all day Sunday, but that is not realistic. Now I will put in 2 hours of work, then take an hour break, then another 2 hours. So again, if your student looks at all of that unscheduled time and says like, well, I'll just do homework for 15 hours on Sunday, very few people can do that, like very few, and do it effectively. And so you really want to encourage your student, like learn to manage your time in a way that works for you. Be realistic. Like don't be lazy, but be realistic. Because the key is for them to set their own schedules and then feel good about the fact that they maintained them, right? And then that encourages better organization and all the rest. Figure out what to do with short breaks in your schedule. So this is where like the calendar thing really helps. So if you remember back to college, or if you have students in college now, you might have like a 9 to 10:30 and then like a 1 to 2:15 and then like a 3 to 4:30 class on like Tuesday, Thursday. Okay, so you've got some chunks of time in there, and there's actually, believe it or not, research that shows that the higher GPAs correlate with students who use those breaks effectively. It's a very, very nuanced thing, but it makes sense to me. Because what happens is that when, again, transition from high school to college, in high school, homework is for nighttime. You're out all day, you come home, you have dinner, you start your homework, you do your 3 hours of homework or whatever it is, and you go to bed and you start all over. In college, if you wait till you come back at 8, 8:30 at night to start your homework, first of all, you're just not going to get it done. Secondly, you're going to miss all the fun stuff. And I don't just mean like on weekends. Hopefully your child is not always doing homework on Friday nights. Sometimes you have to do homework on Friday nights, but usually not. But that's when like people in the dorm are hanging out, or, they're like playing spike ball on the lawn, or, just like chatting in the hallway. And you don't want to miss all of that. You miss some of that, but you don't want to miss all of that. Wake up in the morning and the cycle. So that's where definitely. Can you maybe do laundry? For sure, right? So there's a lot of things you can do during those, I will call them productive, that will help you feel more relaxed and more in control of your own schedule. What instead most students do is get on their phones, I hate to say it, and just sort of scroll or just like sit around, and nobody feels good or refreshed after doing that. And you also aren't getting any work done when you're doing that. And again, this is not meant to say that you have to do homework or studying in those breaks. It can be that like that hour and a half break is when you go for lunch with a friend every Tuesday, right? And that's super productive and important. And I'm going to talk about that last, making friends, which is really the thing that is on every college student's mind. So again, doesn't have to be schoolwork, but if you sort of are using it in a way that is like helpful to you and not helpful to you, it's really important. Okay, so my tips for family at the end of the time management chapter are: number one, if your child is still in high school, stop waking them up. I mean, my husband's here, like, we've done it. We've done it. I mean, maybe like if they have the SAT that day, like wake them up. But otherwise, like, stop, because they have to. I posted on one of those like somewhat scary Facebook groups about like college stuff, and I asked the parent, it's a parent group, and I asked, like, what are you most worried about for your college freshmen? The number one response was that they won't get to class because they'll sleep through their alarm. Oh well, right? And I will also tell you that the number one thing that roommates fight over are alarm clocks. I have a stunning number of alarm clock stories from my students because, like, one snoozes it too many times, whatever. So try, as painful it is to build the habits now, because it feels like it's high stakes now. It really is not. And, like, frankly, like, the high schools should enforce the rules, punish them when they're late in friendly, nice ways, but so that they learn the consequences. So that is like a painful thing, but I think super important. I think before they go to school, if you still have a high school student, it's even better to do it then. Like, get them used to using like Google Calendar or research time management apps with them. We have two children. One, like, was all over Google Calendar, like joined the family calendar, put her events in the calendar. The other one, not so much. Not so much. He figured it out when he got to college, but he was not so. But it while you're there and with them, it's nice because it's like, you know, you can sort of hold their hand through it a little bit. The last thing I'll say is to, once your child's in college, watch for signs of burnout. Like, most professors recommend that for every hour of class, you should be studying 2 to 3 hours, which sounds like a lot, but if you think about 15 hours of class, and let's just say 2, because I'm not so good at math, that's 30 hours of studying a week. So if you add your class time and your study time, you're still at 45 hours a week, which was less than you were scheduled in high school. So you can fit in 8, and if 3 hours per hour, like, you're going to be good. Like, there's no one who works that hard and doesn't succeed in college. I'm not going to say you're going to get straight A's, but academically, you're going to be good. That allows you room to grow. So if your student is like anxious about doing well and they are studying all day, every day, and like pulling all-nighters in September, they're going to have a really hard time when midterms come, because you need that like room to expand, okay? And so if you find they're doing that, you may want to just try and ask some pointed questions about like their study habits and what they're doing. And it could be they're just procrastinating, or they're, you know, there are other ways to fix it. But yeah, it's very normal for students to be overwhelmed at several points in the semester, but it shouldn't be the whole semester. And if it is, like, there are lots of ways to get help. So you should do that. Okay, the last thing I want to talk about, I think we're doing okay on time, good, is friendship, okay? So writing this chapter of the book was by far the most poignant experience for me, because the interviews with my students and the other students that I know were just like knocked my socks off. Every student that goes to college, this is what they're thinking about. They won't tell, some will tell you that they're nervous about it, but most will not. But I mean, I just spent like the last 48 hours with my freshmen, and that's really what they're worried. They're definitely not worried about what we're doing in class, which is normal, right? It's scary, and like, it's all new stuff, and you know, no matter where, even if you stay home and just take classes at a local college, like, you still like want to know people around you and things like that. So I have some tips, and I do think that a lot of it is just normalizing the way they feel, okay? So the first thing that I always tell students and families to tell their students is be realistic, okay? No one is having as much fun as it looks like on social media. And I know we tell our students that. I could write a whole nother book about social media, but there's been a lot of books written about that. It turns out that the people who post the most are actually having the worst time, usually. And students will tell you that once they figure it out. So I talked to one student who said, during my first year, I texted a friend from home. She had a great Instagram where it looked like she was having the time of her life. What they students about is that you really want your choice. What is fun varies by person, varies by school. So some people choose to go to like the big southern state universities because they want to be at tailgates and football games and fraternity houses that look like mansions and all of that. And so their social media posts are going to look a certain way. But perhaps you chose to go to like a small liberal arts college because you really were attracted, and what's fun for you is maybe like dinner out in the town and like, stopping by like once you're 21, like a bar for a couple drinks, or, it's a very different thing. That's fun for you. Other things super fun for them. One's not better or worse than the other. And the hardest thing for students is to feel confidence in their own choices and trust their own choices. And so if they wanted rah-rah, like they went to a rah-rah school and like that's what it's going to look like. If they wanted to be able to go to like movies on the quad, like that's what they did. And, so it's never as good as it seems. You really do have to be realistic. We can say that a lot of times they will learn it, but I also often say nobody posts when they go to the dining hall alone. But they all do. Every single one of them. You do not get out of college without going to the dining hall alone one time. And nobody posts a picture of that. And that doesn't mean like that person is sad, but again, you really want to be realistic. The second thing I like to say is be patient. So most of these students get to college and they meet a bunch of people and they have this like feeling that this doesn't feel the same way as it does with my high school friends or my friends from home. And of course it doesn't. They had 15, 16, 17, 18 years with some people to develop those relationships. And so no matter what, that shared history and time is going to feel totally different than someone that you have known for a week. Even if that person you've known for a week is going to turn out to be a friend for a lifetime, who actually you have more in common with than your friends from home, perhaps, it's not going to feel that way. And so you really need to remind students, be patient. It shouldn't feel the same. Like, it would be weird if it did feel the same, and that's okay. It doesn't mean that you're not making friends. It doesn't mean that you won't make friends. It just means that it's going to take some time, right? It's going to take some time. I often tell students that the end of my freshman year, so I have like 9 good friends from college that I still keep in touch with, and 1 husband. So 10 people total, okay? At the end of my freshman year, I had only met 2 of them, my husband and 1 friend. The other 8 people I met later in college, and we are still friends many, many years later. And so sometimes it takes a whole year, 2 years to like find your people, so to speak, or to find the relationships that are going to endure, and that's okay, right? It's hard, it feels uncomfortable, but it's okay. So, you really want to be patient. The other thing that I talk about is November. So, November is the worst month of the entire year in university life, and I'm going to tell you why. So the first thing is there's something, I often have a board, there's something called the W curve of college. And like, I did not make this up. You can find it on like lots of university websites and freshman orientation things and stuff. The idea is when you get to college, there's a peak, so the top of the W, right? Everyone is like friendly and exchanging Snapchat info or whatever it is, phone numbers. Everyone's like meeting each other, hi, in the hallway, blah, 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 blah. You're up here. You're meeting people. Most people feel good. Even if you're like uncomfortable and you miss home, like there's a lot of promise, right? That lasts for a bit, but then November comes and you get to the bottom of the W, the first bottom of the W, okay? Why? Because you start to get homesick, you have a ton of academic work, and you get actually sick all at the same time. No one gets out of November healthy. It's like some weird rule of college. Like, I hope that you and your students stay healthy in November, but it is really hard to stay healthy in November. Also, by the way, if you're like on the East Coast, it's dark now in November, right? So all the things, all the reasons that most of us don't like November. Even worse in college, okay? You also might go home, maybe in like October sometime, or even in November for Thanksgiving, and you're back with those people that you have all that shared history with, whether it's your family or your high school friends, and you're like, I don't have to explain myself. I don't have to tell anybody anything about myself. They just know. They just know me. And there's that feeling of comfort again. So then you go back to school and you're like, oh my God, none of these people are really my friends. Like you have all this self-doubt, and you feel good and you're tired and all of those things. So I really am trying to spread the message, particularly to families. When you get the call in November, just say it's okay. Like comfort them, give them suggestions, but don't panic. Yes, there are students that are unhappy and they may end up wanting to go somewhere else, and that's okay. It happens. But often it's just November, like literally just November. So the rest of the W, believe it or not, during final exam week, usually people's moods improve for their first year. Why? There's like sort of like a shared experience and bonding and like being in like the depths of the library. And there's or not, final exam week is stressful because it's final exam week, but everything else is done. You only have to study, so things sort of slow down. You actually weirdly have like more time than you do during the semester. Students don't believe me about that, but it is true. So that, and you go home also, by the way, and then you're home for a month and you're sick of your family, generally speaking. And so you go back excited to see everybody. And excited to get out of your parents' house, typically. So that's the up here. The next drop, picking sophomore housing. Horrible. Like the worst. The worst. I cannot figure out how universities cannot figure out how to do this in a way that does not crush souls, but it's a lot of social engineering, and it's very upsetting. And here's why. Again, they don't have relationships built that can withstand the stress of telling people like, no, I don't want to live with you. I'd rather live with that person. Like that takes a lot of maturity. It also takes your relationship having a level of maturity. That doesn't mean you don't like someone. Like as adults, we know that. It doesn't mean you don't like someone. You might just think that's not a roommate you want to have. But for college students, there's a lot built into that. I will say, in my experience, particularly for the women, I hate to say that. It doesn't mean the men are immune from it, but particularly for the women, there's endless hurt feelings during that time frame. So that's the other bottom of the W. But don't worry, because once they sort that up, it goes back up and they finish on a happy, strong note. Even students who end up transferring, usually by the end of the year, like they are feeling better about things. Interestingly, they feel more confident. They know how to get, like, you know, if you need a haircut or you need to eat or you know where to go for stuff. You feel like you've conquered this new land that is your university. And again, that's even true if you're living at home. You've conquered this new academic setting. So that's the W. Just be ready for November. Just like mentally prepare yourself. I hold my breath like the whole month. And this year, by the way, we have an extra week because Thanksgiving is late. So that's going to be really fun for me. Looking forward to that. Okay, some tips for making like I just like love all these stories. But Okay, so say yes to everything. So the fresher you are on campus, the easier it is to make friends. No one has friends, so everyone is your friend. Freshman year, you only have one roommate, so you are expected to have other friends, okay? Whereas usually when you become a sophomore or junior, a lot of universities have moved to like suite living and things like that for upperclassmen, not all. And so once you're in a suite with 8 people, there becomes this expectation that those are your friends. So like that group can get locked in. But freshman year, the point this person is making is there's a lot of like fluidity, right? Like you can make lots and lots of friends. So I talked a little bit about the value of extracurricular activities. One of the main values is making friends. Okay, not only making friends, but making upperclassmen friends. Getting to know students who are older than you is just so helpful in a million ways. Recommending classes, giving you advice, like all those things. And the best way to do that is to go to clubs. You don't have to be the president of anything in college, unlike high school. You can just go. You can just go. You can just go and listen to the speaker. You can just go and eat the free food. And you know, the people who run the club will feel an obligation to talk to you. And so you will sort of inherently, just by being in that space, have the opportunity to meet people. So that is like really, really helpful. I'm a big proponent of trying to make friends in class. This is challenging because most students come into class like a few minutes before it starts and they just get on their phones. This year I've banned phones before we start. I mean, I've always banned phones while we're learning, but now I've banned them the minute they walk in the room because I want to force them to talk to each other. It's just a really nice, easy way because you're like sitting there. So like everyone's just going to make like chit chat with the people next to each other. And then you do have to sort of put yourself out there, but you can say like, do you want to get lunch after class? I'm going to talk about lunch in a second. But sometimes like, oh, do you want to study for that quiz together? Make study groups and things like that. And class is a great opportunity to do that. The way you go from those acquaintances that you make at the beginning of the semester to friendships is the same way we all made our friends, which is shared experiences and time, right? If you think about like, how did you make friends with the friends you have? Like either you just like like maybe you worked with them or whatever it is, you spent a lot of time with them, or you had some shared experience of some kind. Your kids were on the same soccer team or whatever it might be. And so you saw them at every game every Saturday. Right? And so it's that repetition that is actually really important. Well, that's why classes are a genius way to make friends because you're automatically together twice a week or 3 times a week. And so you are always going to see them. And so it's really a nice way to, for students who maybe don't feel great about going to parties or other things to start to make some friends. The number one thing that I heard from students about making friends was to go to lunch. I really never thought about this very much, honestly, from my perspective, but every single one of them were like, yeah, I made friends because we went to lunch together. I made friends with that person because we went to lunch together. So Maria said, freshman year, 2 classmates stopped by my room to say hello. I asked if they wanted to have lunch. We all went and had fun. We decided to meet every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at noon for lunch and kept it up all semester. And so again, like that's a very low stakes way to take someone from an acquaintance to like actually getting to know them. The same students told me a story later in the book where she went on a spring break trip for like a service trip for spring break. And she met a lot of lovely people that weren't really in her circles at the university already. Like they weren't in her major and like, nor in her dorm. And so after that, they decided like the way to keep in touch was to set up a weekly lunch. And so that's what they did. And so that could have been a group of people that she sort of spent a good week with, but never really, and said hi to once in a while, but never really built into a meaningful relationship. But everyone has to eat. And so you might as well do it with others. Okay. So, if you, have students in college or if you have students going to college, like really encourage them. You do have to sort of put yourself out there a little bit and just say to the person next to you, like, do you want to grab lunch? But 99% of the time they will say yes, or they'll say like, sorry, I have another class. And, it's not embarrassing, right? Or, it shouldn't make you feel bad about yourself, but it can, really build into something. So I know we're edging up at our time, but I just wanted some tips for families from the end of the friendship chapter, which has like so much more in it, so many great, lovely stories. Okay, stop telling your children that college was the best 4 years of your life, because it probably is not true. It is probably true that you had like an okay year, like somewhat awkward, followed by like a pretty good year, followed by 2 really good years. Or some combination of that, right? Because if you really reflect on your college experience, if you had one, like probably your first year, you also were nervous and scared. And maybe you met great friends right away, but it still was like difficult. Or maybe by junior year, you were tired of everyone and that was hard. So I think we have glamorized college and friendships a lot. And we need to stop, because it puts a lot of pressure on students to feel like that right away. And most will build that relationship before they graduate, you hope, but it won't be until much later, right? Like I said, do not panic in November when your student calls crying and says they're upset and miserable and it's dark and they're cold and they don't feel well and all of those other things. Remind them that it is normal. Remind them they're going to be home soon, and, just be sympathetic. I also really encourage families, depending on where their students are, to try and leave them alone for maybe a month. Go to parents' family weekend if they have family weekend. I don't mean to talk to them, but I find letting them come home really early can become a little bit of a crutch. And you do have to be forced to be uncomfortable, not sad or depressed, but forced to be uncomfortable so that they can like push themselves into, putting themselves out there. So the book also, I do want to note, has a lot of information about like resources and how to get help, because I know sometimes there are other things going on in students' lives that make it hard to make friends. So whether it's like a mental health issue or a physical health issue or family life at home, like the book has a whole section on getting help and understanding how to get help. So I don't want to make it seem like anyone can just make friends anytime they want. I know that that isn't always true, but I do find that for most students, even those who are having struggles, they do get there, but they have to like lean into the discomfort a little. So that is all I have planned. If you're interested in the book, I have a couple here for the people who are here. It's available on Amazon. And we can maybe send out an email with a link after to everyone who signed up. It's also available in several local bookstores. I've learned a lot about bookstores since publishing this book, because I self-published. It's available at the Harvard Bookstore in Cambridge. It's available at Hummingbird Books in Chestnut Hill. I'm probably forgetting a couple, but and also online through a lot of independent bookstores, online services around the country, actually, very strangely, I've learned over time. So if you would prefer to buy it there, I think that's awesome. So so that's it. And thank you so much for coming, and I will take any questions or concerns. Any questions?
There's one question.
Okay. Oh, so I think it's mostly a freshman phenomenon or first year phenomenon, because their friendships, there are ups and downs of friendships after their first year of college. And actually I have some good stories in the book from students who totally reshifted their friendships like later in college. But for the most part, it's a little steadier. Now, that said, November is November for everyone. So it might not be a friendship concern sophomore, junior, senior year, but they're all sick and tired and want to go home and are miserable, and it's dark and cold, and yeah.
I wonder if this is true for California schools.
It's an excellent question. Yes, whether in Florida they have, I think they still have like the academic pressures and things because the pattern of the semester is so predictable everywhere. I mean, I guess if you're in like trimesters or like a unique calendar, it's a little bit different, but sort of that like a few weeks before the end of the semester, that's when everyone hits the wall.
I would think you'd still get sick too, because it's college and it's like your first year, and you're like,
Yeah, the
your
germs.
body's so out of whack in so many ways.
Yeah,
You know.
yeah,
I'm just.
yeah. Yeah, not cold or dark, but all the other things.
Someone was confirming it's true for California. November sucks.
Okay, there you go. Thank you for confirming. Thank you for confirming. Yeah. Anything else? Any other questions?
Did your children read the book?
I can confirm that one child read the book, the one who's a freshman in college, and she's been citing it back to me since she got to college a few days ago. And like in orientation, when there's like a slide about like the advantages of extracurriculars, she's like taking a photo and being like, I've seen that data before. Yeah. The other one, I don't know. Do you think he read it?
Bits and pieces so he could tell you if he read it.
Yeah, exactly.
He's only a junior, so
Yeah,
he's
he's a
like-
junior.
He's like got it down.
He
like,
thinks
"Ah,
he's a-
I think I could write the book. Right.
He thinks he's a pro. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Did you take your own advice when you were touring campuses, for instance? Did you go through, I don't know if your daughter was undecided when she applied or whether she knew what she wanted to study, but did you go through
Yeah.
the department? And
Great question.
It is a good question. We did, when we could, try to point out, like, there's where, like, professors' offices are, or, like, it's, you can pick up on even, like, what students say about their professors if you ask the right questions about, like, I always ask, like, do you know any professors well? Or, I was, like, the worst parent to bring on a college tour because I asked a lot of annoying questions. But, yeah, I did try and take some of my own advice. Yeah, for sure.
I have a question on mine. When do you think it's enough time if a student is unhappy to consider transfer?
That's a really good question. I think you really want to get well into the second semester. I mean, you can start exploring it because I know the applications, like, I don't know the exact timing of transfer applications, but some of them are like maybe March or something like that. But I think it's really good if you can to just say, like, just get through the first semester and go back if and again, everyone is different, and there are some students that have like challenges that they really shouldn't go back, right? But if it's just like, I'm not making friends, or I'm not sure this is the right fit for me, which is, again, it happens. It's very normal. I always say, like, try and get through like spring break before you make any definitive choices. And also, I cannot tell you how many students I've had apply to transfer and then decide to stay, because by the time they hear by the time spring semester ends, they're like, you know what, it turns out like I just like joined this club and then I met some people and I felt better. And that doesn't happen for everyone, and there's also like purely academic reasons to transfer. You decide you want to do a course of study that this university doesn't have and that other one does, and so those are very valid as well. But I think try and give it through spring break if you can. Yeah. Anything else? Okay, well, thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate it.